The ground is sinking. Not slowly, not gradually, but at a rate that's making engineers panic and farmers go bankrupt. Parts of California's Central Valley are dropping a foot per year. And the craziest part? Most Californians have no idea it's happening. Recent footage from the region shows roads buckling, canals cracking, and infrastructure failing in ways that weren't supposed to happen for decades. So what's causing California's breadbasket to literally collapse? And why is nobody talking about it? Keep watching, because this gets way worse before it gets better. Let's start with what the Central Valley actually is. Because if you're not from California, you might think it's just farmland. And yeah, it's farmland. But calling the Central Valley just farmland is like calling the Amazon just trees. This region produces 25% of America's food. 1/4, that tomato in your salad, probably from here. Those almonds you overpaid for at Whole Foods, definitely from here. The milk in your fridge, the grapes in your fruit bowl, the garlic on your pizza, all Central Valley. We're talking about a region that's 450 miles long and up to 60 miles wide. It stretches from Redding in the north almost down to Los Angeles. Over 7 million people live here. It generates over $50 billion in agricultural revenue every year. This isn't some minor farming community. This is the economic engine that feeds America and exports to the world. And it's sinking. The technical term is subsidence, which sounds way less terrifying than it actually is. Subsidence is when the ground literally drops. Though those happen too. The entire land surface is compacting, settling, dropping down. In some areas of the Central Valley, the ground has sunk more than 28 feet since the 1920s. 28 feet. That's the height of a 2-story house. But here's where it gets current and scary. The rate of sinking has accelerated massively in the last decade. Areas that were sinking an inch or two per year are now dropping a foot or more. Between 2012 and 2016, during California's massive drought, some spots near Corcoran sank more than 2 feet. In 4 years, recent satellite data from 2023 and 2024 shows it's not slowing down. So what's causing this? The answer is water, the lack of it. The Central Valley sits on top of massive underground aquifers, basically ancient lakes trapped in rock and sediment. For over a century, farmers have been drilling wells and pumping that water up to irrigate crops. The ground above it compacts to fill that space. It's like deflating a balloon that's buried under your yard. Now you might be thinking, okay, so stop pumping water, and the problem goes away. Right. Wrong. Once the ground compacts, it doesn't reinflate. This isn't a balloon. The clay and sediment compress permanently. You can refill the aquifer with water, and they're trying to do that. But the ground stays compressed. The damage is done forever. The footage coming out of the Central Valley in 2024 and early 2025 is wild. We're seeing roads that look like someone took a giant can opener to them. The California Aqueduct, this massive concrete canal that carries water from north to south, is cracks running through sections of it. Bridges are misaligned because one side sank more than the other. There's a bridge near Chowchilla, where the approaches on either side are at different heights now. You literally drive uphill onto the bridge and downhill off it, even though it's supposed to be level. Railroad tracks are warping. High-speed rail construction, California's multi-billion-dollar train project that's already a mess, is having to redesign entire sections because the ground elevation keeps changing. They'll build a section of track, and 6 months later it's out of alignment because everything around it sank. They're literally chasing a moving target. Farmers are dealing with infrastructure failure on a massive scale. Irrigation systems that used to work perfectly don't work anymore because the gradient changed. Water flows downhill, obviously. But if your field drops 2 feet relative to your canal, suddenly gravity doesn't move water where it needs to go. Farmers are having to install new pumps, redesign entire irrigation networks, spend money they don't have fixing problems that shouldn't exist. Buildings are cracking, homes, barns, processing facilities, all dealing with foundation issues. When the ground under a building sinks unevenly, the structure twists, walls crack, doors stop closing, windows break. There's footage from Fresno showing houses with visible cracks running up the walls. Not from earthquakes, from subsidence. Insurance doesn't cover this, by the way. Subsidence isn't an insured risk in most policies. Homeowners are stuck with repair bills that can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. They use something called INSAR, Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. Satellites measure the ground elevation with incredible precision over time. The maps they produce are terrifying. Huge swaths of the Central Valley are bright red, indicating rapid subsidence. Some areas are dropping more than 12 inches per year. Let's talk about why this accelerated so dramatically. The 2012 to 2016 drought was the worst in California's modern history. Surface water, the stuff from rivers and reservoirs, basically disappeared in many areas. Farmers had no choice but to pump groundwater. They drilled deeper wells. They pumped more volume. They ran those pumps 24/7, trying to keep crops alive. And here's the brutal economics of it. If you're a farmer with almond trees, you can't just let them die during a drought. Almond trees take years to mature. If they die, you're losing not just this year's crop, but years of investment. So you pump whatever water you can find to keep them alive. You don't have a choice. The alternative is bankruptcy. But all that pumping created this accelerated subsidence. The aquifers dropped dramatically. The ground above them compacted, and now we're seeing the consequences. California passed laws to try to fix this. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014 was supposed to regulate pumping, force farmers to use water sustainably. The law gave local agencies until 2040 to actually balance their water budgets. 2040. That's 15 years away. In the meantime, the pumping continues, and the ground keeps sinking. There's also the issue of enforcement. Who's checking how much water each farmer pumps? Who's monitoring the thousands of wells across the valley? The infrastructure for that kind of oversight barely exists. Farmers self-report their water usage in many cases. It's an honor system for one of the biggest environmental crises in California history. Recent investigations have shown that some large agricultural operations are pumping way more than they report. There's been footage of drilling rigs installing new wells in the middle of the night, presumably because the owners don't want attention. The bigger farms with more resources can afford deeper wells. They're reaching water that smaller farms can't access. It's creating a two-tier system where wealthy agricultural corporations drain aquifers while small family farms go under. The environmental justice angle here is massive. The communities most affected by subsidence are predominantly Latino, low-income, agricultural workers and their families. Huron. These aren't wealthy communities. They don't have the political power or financial resources to fix failing infrastructure. Their wells are running dry because the water table dropped. They're dealing with contaminated water because as aquifers deplete, naturally occurring arsenic and other contaminants become concentrated. There's footage from these communities showing people collecting water from distribution centers because their tap water isn't safe to drink. In California, in 2025, in the state with the fifth largest economy in the world, people are living without clean water because of subsidence-related aquifer depletion. The economic impact is staggering. California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, estimates they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on subsidence-related repairs. That's money that could go to building new infrastructure, maintaining schools, any number of other priorities. Instead, it's going to fix roads that are buckling and bridges that are cracking. The California aqueduct situation deserves its own section because it's almost unbelievable. This aqueduct is 444 miles long. It's one of the largest water conveyance systems in the world. It carries water from Northern California down to the Central Valley and Southern California. Millions of people depend on this water. The aqueduct was built in the 1960s, designed to last a century with normal maintenance. But subsidence is destroying it decades ahead of schedule. The concrete canal is rigid. When the ground under it sinks unevenly, the concrete cracks. Water leaks out. There are sections where one side of the canal has dropped several feet relative to the other side. Engineers are having to install flexible joints, basically expansion gaps, to allow for continued movement. They're treating the aqueduct like it's in an earthquake zone, except the movement is constant and ongoing. Repairing the aqueduct is incredibly expensive. They can't just shut it down for months to fix it. Too many people and farms depend on that water, so they're doing rolling repairs, shutting down sections temporarily, working as fast as possible, then moving to the next section. It's like trying to renovate a house while people are still living in it. Is facing even bigger challenges. The first section being built runs right through the Central Valley, through areas experiencing some of the worst subsidence. We're talking tolerances measured in millimeters. If the track alignment is off by too much, trains can't run safely at high speeds. The engineers building this are discovering that areas they surveyed and graded 2 years ago have sunk significantly. They're having to resurvey constantly. In some cases, they're building flexible sections that can adjust as the ground continues to sink. They're installing sensors to monitor elevation changes in real time. They're basically trying to build a high-precision railway on top of quicksand. The cost overruns are massive, and subsidence is a big part of why. There's also the issue of what happens when you try to stop the sinking. California has programs to recharge aquifers, putting water back underground during wet years. It's called Managed Aquifer Recharge, and it's a good idea in theory. Take excess water from floods and rain, spread it across fields or into recharge basins. Let it percolate down into the aquifer. This helps maintain water levels and reduces the need to pump during dry years. But remember, the compaction is permanent, but the ground doesn't rise back up. And there's another problem. When you rapidly recharge an aquifer that's been severely depleted, you can cause differential swelling. Some areas expand slightly, as water fills pore spaces. Other areas don't. This creates uneven ground movement, which causes its own infrastructure problems. Recent footage from recharge sites shows exactly this happening, just in different directions than before. Cracks are forming in different patterns. It's like trying to fix a problem by creating a slightly different problem. Better than doing nothing, probably, but not exactly a clean solution. The agricultural community is divided on how to respond. Some farmers are getting out entirely, selling their land, moving on. Property values in subsidence-prone areas have dropped significantly. Who wants to buy land that's literally sinking? But some investors are buying it up cheap, betting they can make money even with the infrastructure challenges. Other farmers are trying to adapt. They're switching to crops that use less water. Almonds and alfalfa, two incredibly water-intensive crops, are slowly being replaced in some areas with things like pistachios or wine grapes that need less irrigation. But this transition is slow and expensive. You can't just rip out almond orchards overnight. Those trees represent huge investments. There's also a move toward more efficient irrigation, drip irrigation instead of flood irrigation, soil moisture sensors, all the technology that reduces water waste. This helps, but it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The ground is still sinking. Using water more efficiently just slows the problem. It doesn't stop it. Climate change is making everything worse. California's water supply has always been variable, wet years and dry years. But climate models predict longer, more intense droughts interspersed with extreme wet years. The 2023 storms that dumped massive rain on California, causing flooding throughout the Central Valley, that's becoming the new pattern. Feast or famine. No middle ground. During extreme wet years, there's too much water to capture and store efficiently. The recharge basins can only handle so much. Reservoirs fill up and have to release water for flood control. That water flows to the ocean instead of going into aquifers. Then, during the inevitable dry years that follow, farmers go right back to pumping groundwater, and the cycle continues. The political response has been slow and inadequate. Sacramento knows this is a problem. Everyone knows it's a problem. But solving it requires hard choices that politicians don't want to make. Restricting water use means telling farmers they can't irrigate as much. That means some farms fail. That means job losses in communities that are already economically struggling. That means powerful agricultural lobbies getting angry. So instead of bold action, we get studies and task forces and pilot programs. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act sounds good, but giving local agencies until 2040 to balance their water budgets is a joke. At current rates of subsidence, by 2040 some areas will have sunk another 15 feet. The infrastructure damage will be catastrophic. The aquifers will be so depleted that recovery might be impossible. There's footage from public meetings in Central Valley communities where residents are confronting water managers and elected officials. These people are watching their homes crack, their wells dry up, their communities fall apart, and the response from government is basically "we're working on it." The frustration is palpable. These communities feel abandoned. The comparison to other subsidence disasters is instructive. Mexico City has experienced severe subsidence, sinking more than 30 feet in some areas. Parts of the city are nearly uninhabitable now. Venice is sinking, though they've managed to slow it with industrial water use restrictions. Jakarta is sinking so fast that Indonesia is building a new capital city. California has the advantage of knowing this is happening, having the data, understanding the mechanism. But knowledge doesn't matter if you don't act on it. What makes the Central Valley situation particularly complex is the interconnection between agriculture, water, economy, and society. You can't just stop farming. The economic impact would be devastating, not just for California, but for the entire country. Food prices would spike, communities would collapse, but you also can't keep pumping groundwater at unsustainable rates. The infrastructure costs alone will eventually exceed the value of the agriculture being produced. Some experts are proposing radical solutions. Retire significant amounts of farmland, take it out of production permanently, focus water resources on the most productive, most sustainable farms, invest billions in water infrastructure, new aqueducts, desalination plants, massive recharge operations. Fundamentally reorganize California agriculture around available water rather than trying to provide water for existing agriculture. But these solutions require political will and money that doesn't currently exist. The state is already dealing with massive budget deficits. Asking the state to invest tens of billions in fixing subsidence, while also dealing with homelessness, education, healthcare, and everything else. Good luck. Meanwhile, the ground keeps sinking. Every day, every week, every month. The satellite data doesn't lie. The measurements are precise. Areas that were fine 5 years ago are problematic now. Areas that were problematic 5 years ago are reaching crisis levels. And nobody seems to have the power or the will to do anything about it at the scale necessary. Recent footage shows something else that's emerging as a consequence. Tule Lake. You've probably never heard of it, but Tule Lake used to be one of the largest freshwater lakes in the United States. It covered hundreds of square miles in the southern Central Valley. The lake bed became some of the most productive farmland in the world. But Tulare Lake never really went away. During extreme wet years, water still flows to the lake bed. It's the natural drainage point for a huge area. And with subsidence, parts of the old lake bed have sunk even further, creating deeper depressions. When the 2023 storms hit, Tulare Lake came back. Tens of thousands of acres flooded. Farmland went underwater. Towns were threatened. The lake persisted for months. The footage of Tulare Lake reforming is surreal. You're looking at what's supposed to be farmland, fields of crops, and instead it's a massive lake. Boats where tractors should be. This is a direct consequence of subsidence combined with extreme weather. The lake bed sank, creating a deeper basin. Water filled that basin. And because the ground is compacted clay, the water doesn't drain quickly. It sits there. Farmers whose land flooded lost millions. Crops destroyed, equipment damaged, land unusable. Insurance doesn't cover this adequately because it's not standard flooding. It's subsidence-related flooding, a different category of disaster. Some farmers are still dealing with saturated soil years later because the water won't drain properly from the compacted ground. This is the future of the Central Valley if nothing changes. More subsidence, more infrastructure failure, more economic damage, more communities in crisis. And the really terrifying part. This is happening during relatively normal years. If California enters another severe multi-year drought like 2012 to 2016, the pumping will accelerate again. The subsidence will get worse. The damage will multiply. The Central Valley is a perfect storm of bad policy, environmental change, economic pressure, and physics. You've got farmers trying to survive in an increasingly difficult climate. You've got communities that depend on agriculture for their existence. You've got infrastructure designed for stable ground conditions that no longer exist. And you've got government agencies that know what needs to happen but can't or won't make it happen fast enough. The footage keeps coming in. Every month, new satellite data, new reports of infrastructure damage, new measurements of subsidence rates. Engineers studying this compare the data to previous years and the trend is clear and bad. Without major intervention, large parts of the Central Valley will be dealing with catastrophic infrastructure failure within the next decade. So what's the takeaway? Is sinking at rates that are causing billions of dollars in damage, threatening food security and creating humanitarian crises in rural communities. The causes are well understood. The solutions exist, but aren't being implemented at necessary scale, and time is running out to prevent permanent, irreversible damage to one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more deep dives into stories that aren't getting enough attention, hit subscribe. More videos coming soon.